Story number 1. I work summers as a camp counsellor in the northern parts of Ontario, Canada. On the date this particular incident occurred, I was camping with a group of 10-year-old boys on the same lake the summer camp was based on. So, like a routine camping trip, we canoed out to the site and set up our tents. Me and my co-counsellor, Mike, take turns supervising the kids while they swam, built forts and played games. We cook some food over the fire, sit around and tell stories, cook s'mores, the typical Canadian camping experience. Around 9:30ish, I tell the kids it's time for bed and they head into their tents, which were positioned a small walk away from the shoreline, but still in line of sight from where we had the fire pit. So the kids have gone to bed, and me and Mike are shooting shit by the water smoking a cigarette, just basically hanging out before we decide to head into our tents and call it a night. What happened next still troubles me to this day, and remains my go-to scary campfire story. We were both gazing into the pitch-black night water when we saw a small light approaching us slowly, slightly above water level. We speculated what it could be for a few minutes, before it came close enough for us to see that it was mounted on the front of a kayak, and that someone was approaching our campsite. Now, it is important to note that as a camp counsellor, part of our training goes over how to deal with stranger encounters in an environment where we were responsible for a group of children on public property. I was prepared to give the mystery paddler the typical speech about how we're camping with a group from a recognised organisation, and we would respectfully ask them to find another campsite. However, this person's appearance shook me to the bone as the light drew nearer. Paddling this kayak was a woman who looked to be in her 60s. She had incredibly long wisps of grey hair that was trailing in the water. Her skin looked like old leather, and her dead-looking eyes were tough to spot under all the wrinkles. She looked directly at me, and when she spoke, I realised she was missing most of her teeth. "Are all your children safe in bed?" she asked me, pointing in the direction of the tents. Not really knowing how to respond and quite frankly shitting myself, I responded by telling her that they were fine and she had to leave. "That's good, just as expected for this time," she said with a smile, then turned her kayak and paddled off into the night. At this point in time, myself and Mike were legitimately very creeped out, not only by the appearance of this mysterious woman, who resembled a freaking corpse, but also her inquiry about the whereabouts and safety of the kids we'd brought on the trip. Not knowing what else to do, we grabbed our hunting knives and sat by the fire after checking on the kids. Half an hour later is where shit started to get really creepy. Across the lake, a female counsellor was leading another trip for kids the same age group. She sent me a text which read something along the lines of, "Hey Sean, stop screwing with us. This isn't funny. My kids are really creeped out." I instantly called her and let her know I'd just seen someone near my campsite that seemed eerie and that I wasn't trying to play a joke. Apparently, one of their kids had opened their tent door to take a piss and saw a woman with long hair standing with her arms open towards them near the shoreline. Story number 2. To preface this, I just want to say that last year, I spent about 32 days in the woods, either scouting, hunting, or fishing. The year before that, I spent about 22 days. This doesn't include my regular hunts or camping adventures, which in the past 3 years adds up to just over 100 days. I've been hunting since I was 9, and have spent a lot of time outdoors, in various different parts of the US and in Canada. I've seen and heard a lot of strange shit, but this takes the cake. I was in Cohutta, North Georgia wilderness, for 7 days scouting for bears, wild hogs and deer, prepping for a hunting trip later that year. I had hiked in about 10 miles, and then went off trail for another 3 to 5 miles. Basically, I was in the middle of nowhere. Since I was alone, I was using a hammock that has a built-in bug net, and I had a rain fly over it. I spent about 3 days halfway up a mountain, just looking for a good place to hunt. I saw 3 to 4 good-sized bears, about 10 hogs, and came across some good-sized deer. On the 4th day, I was going to head down to a small stream that I'd marked on my GPS and then set up camp, restock on water and prep for the 2-day hike back. I could have gone faster, but wanted to be able to look for any animal sign along the way. As I was approaching the small stream, I noticed a tent, which I was excited to see, as I had been completely alone for a few days, and it's always nice to run into another hiker. Generally, us wilderness folk are pretty down to earth. As I got closer to the tent, I noticed that there was a small pack on the ground just outside of it. I figured the person couldn't have gone too far from where the camp was, so I set up my camp about 30 yards away, and with about 4 hours left of daylight, started cooking some dinner. 2 hours later, I was starting to wonder where this person was. Given that I was in the wilderness, and it was over a day hike out, there wasn't much I could do. But I did hike around the site, making a circle as I went out, to look for any signs of a struggle, in case of a bear attack, or maybe they had an injury. I got about a quarter of a mile from the campsite, walking a circle, but I didn't find anything. As night came, no one showed up. I started a fire, in hopes that the person would be able to find where they set up, and have some light. Fires burn really bright, and are very easy to see from far away. After eating, searching, and hoping that the person was going to make it back, I called it a night. I had a small flask with me and took a couple of sips of whiskey, jumped into my hammock with my pistol, and attempted to go to sleep. I sleep pretty hard, I mean really hard, regardless of where I am. It literally annoys my friends because I can always seem to fall asleep and stay asleep, regardless of where in the world we are. But this night was different. I felt like something was off, but I figured it was just me worrying about this person who, by all my accounts, was completely missing. So, for the first time in my life, I woke up to the sound of what I thought were footsteps. But not in the sense of footsteps on leaves, but what a heavy-footed person would make walking on an old wooden floor. It was extremely loud. I got my gun, grabbed my headlamp, stored in a small compartment up above me, and waited to see if it would stop. Right at that moment, it did. Then, I saw something that scared the shit out of me. On my rainfly, the gleam of a flashlight, faint but there. I shouted, "Hello?" And right when I did, it sounded like 10 people suddenly running away from me in every direction. I dropped out of my hammock onto the ground, frantically turning on my headlamp, shining it all around me. But I didn't see shit. My heart was racing pretty bad, and I thought it might have just been the reflection of the moon on the rainfly. Yeah, that was it. And those footsteps running away from me were probably just armadillos or something, even though their eyes shine, and they are pretty easy to spot. Problem was, there was no moon. I'd never seen an armadillo above 2,000 feet. Not to say they don't live up there, just never seen one. And for some reason, the campsite I'd set up by was gone. The fire had been put out by water. It was apparent because there wasn't a damn coal in the thing. I thought for sure it was about 4 AM, but I'd only been asleep for about an hour. At this point, I wanted to leave, but hiking out in the wilderness while it's dark is always a bad idea. So I grabbed my flask, took a swig of whiskey, removed my rainfly so I could see out of my hammock and around the area I was in, and tried my hardest to get back to sleep. I was laying down when I saw some light hit the trees above me. It was clear it was coming from downstream. I got out of my hammock and started yelling, "Hey, you need any help?" No response. I saw whatever was putting out the light, and it spun around and started heading downstream, really fast. At this point, my body had pumped through more adrenaline than it had blood, and I was exhausted from it all. I finally was able to fall asleep and woke up around 7 AM. When I did, I noticed that my water filter I'd left out was missing. It's a gravity filter, and it hangs on a tree filtering water down into my main bladder that I'd put in my backpack. And my water bladder, sitting at the base of a tree, looked like it was cut down the middle with a knife. They cut down my bear bag, which had food in it, and took some of it. The creepiest part of all of it was that they went through my bag, which was under my hammock while I was sleeping. I checked the bear bag before I went to sleep the second time, and it was still there, hanging, and my bag under my hammock hadn't been touched. I packed all my shit and hightailed it out of there, keeping my pistol close to me and moving as fast as I could. I ended up making the hike back in just under 15 hours. I hiked the trail part in the night because I wasn't about to spend another night out there. I didn't see anyone on my hike out. There were no cars parked at the trailhead, and the DNR said they'd only seen my car there. Since then, I haven't gone out there without any friends. I reported all of this to the local DNR, but they looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I am. Story number 3. Let me give you some background information. I'm 18 and living in Dagenham. It's quite a busy area, so there's normally a lot of people around. This particular night, me and my friend, I'll call him Jim, were on our way to camp out at a local park. You were never allowed in past 10 PM, so we'd have to hide from the park police. The park we were staying at was always busy up until about 9 PM, then it turns into a ghost field. Anyway, to the story. We had set out for the park at about 8:30, so by the time we got there wouldn't be anyone around to grass us up. We arrived and everything went according to plan. We had the tent, snacks, portable DVD player, Pokemon Go at the ready. It was perfect. 10 PM came and we heard the park police shutting up the gates. They're quite loud, so it's always easy to hear the gates creak. Once we were sure the police had left, we decided to whip out our phones and play some Pokemon Go. There was a Pokestop in the park, and I had a lure module to use. We'd been playing for about half an hour when we heard a loud bang come from the gate. It sounded like someone ran into it. Dagenham's known for its drunks, so we shook it off as nothing. Cut the long story short, we went back to the tent, watched a couple of action films and went to sleep. Not even an hour into sleep, and I woke up with a horrible sense of dread, like someone was watching me. All my senses were heightened. Something wasn't right. I hear some crunching coming from behind the tent. I thought it must have been a fox, until I heard it, or should I say them, speak. I managed to make out the words, "They're gonna hear us! Keep your damn mouth shut!" I quickly but violently shook Jim to wake him up and told him what I'd heard. I needed to make sure I wasn't crazy, so I made him listen. While listening, his face turned white. The fear spread across his face. He grabbed my arm and whispered, "We need to make a run for it. Just trust me." I didn't hesitate. We were quite athletic people, so running isn't a problem. We slowly unzipped the tent, and with one big breath, made a mad dash for the gate. We heard pounding footsteps and heavy breathing behind us as a guy shouted in a horrible musky voice, "Oi, slow down, we just want to play with you." And both the guys started laughing madly, like seriously it was some fucked up laugh. We made it to the fence and leapt over with ease. The rest was just a mad dash to my house, which was only around the corner. We made it back, slammed the door, ran up to my room and peeked out the bedroom window. We saw both guys sprint past my house, both holding something metallic. It was hard to see it as it was pitch black due to the streetlight being out. Go figure. At that moment I turned to Jim and asked why he looked so terrified back in the tent. He then went on to explain what he heard the guys say. "You grab the small one, the large one's mine. The bigger they are, the bigger the challenge." That terrified me. We went back to the tent the next morning and found all our stuff destroyed. Tent was slashed, portable DVD player was snapped in half, and all our food was thrown all over the place. We never told anyone. I think we were too proud to say we ran away. All I know is, I'm never going camping again. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.